Good evening, Hare Krishna, spiritual warriors. How are you today? I'll begin by apologizing for the technological difficulties last week. I don't know why I'm apologizing. All I do is sit and look at the camera, but the technicians were having problems. And the feedback I got today from someone who was online that not much of anything I said was understood a little bit, and then we were off for a while. So what I'm going to do today, we're working first of all from which book? Spiritual Warrior 4, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind. And we are working and discussing one of those enemies, which is anger. So I'm going to just begin where I may have begun last week. But what I'm finding every week, whenever I pick up the book and read, it's like, wow, did I read that before? Have I looked at that before? And he writes in such depth and caringness and compassion that I don't think we can ever hear enough of it. And I don't know if any of you have the book. Of course, if you have the book Spiritual Warrior 4, you can follow with me very nicely. And if not, maybe you're making notes. And if not, then maybe you'll have a comment or question on the chat room. And if not, somebody's saying to me I can ask for comments or statements on Facebook. But I can't say I would get right back to you. When I go to my e-box right now, I've got a lot of Facebook's wonderful people wanting a response. So, but let's go with this evening. We're studying from, hearing from Bhakti Tirtha Swami, Spiritual Warrior 4, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind. And the enemy we're discussing is anger. I'm not going to do a big review, just want to run down a few, what we've covered so far. We've covered sections called the can't even read my own writing. But one is, why does anger develop? I just want to trigger a little maybe memory in you if you've been with us, and if you haven't, then maybe you'll order the book from Krishna.com store. So we started off with a statement from the scriptures, Bhagavatam. A person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread to all others. And you know, we covered that. We covered the pervasiveness of anger and how it just destroys everything in its wake. We talked about why does anger develop? And it really develops from the enemies of the mind. That's what this book is about. And remember the enemies? We spoke of it. We named them many times. Envy, greed, madness, illusion, fear. And what was the one we studied before? Especially lust. All of these enemies lead to anger. So, and from that it develops. He talked about the triggers of anger. Remember that? And he gave us 5 shoulds, the triggers of shoulds. 5 shoulds. He gave us 4 blamers. And then after telling us the negative things that happen with anger, what did he do? Caring for us very much. He gives us 9 positive ways to deal with those shoulds and blamers. So then he goes on with the progression of anger. Remember? He gave it's an adverse chain reaction to it, and he reminds us how we can avoid all the trouble simply by honoring and addressing the situation properly from the very beginning. We will develop spirituality. Remember, we're on the path of spiritual warriorship. We will develop spirituality in a very dynamic way. Then he gives us techniques to recognize the progression of anger. Remember those? Then he talked about the effects of anger, physical problems, social disturbances, how you really turn people off if you're just on an anger binge, so to speak. He spoke of spiritual weaknesses and offenses, how we can make offenses to others, and he gave nice pastime and story there. He also said that anger conceals the cause of pain. Anger can cause us to hide or conceal our pain if we use it as a defense mechanism. And he also spoke of how anger creates irrational responses to situations. And tonight we will begin with the section entitled Anger Management. Counteracting negativity. Anger management is an essential technology for the spiritual warrior. It keeps reminding us we are spiritual warriors. We are eternal beings, and to get a sense of your spiritual self, we should not minimize the serious effects of anger, which lead to violence and even wars. Some of the terrorists feel so much anger that they will even take their own lives in order to hurt someone else. Obviously, this intense anger will only increase in a society in which people feel lonely, unprotected, and threatened. As a reaction to these attacks and threats, people tend to strike out in self-defense. Furthermore, when people feel that others do not value them or their needs, the culture of anger will also proportionately grow. And I think if we think seriously, in our own lives, when there are moments when we don't feel valued, or we're trying to express that we have a need and it's being ignored, that agitation comes, that anger. Now he says, although this negative culture will continuously increase, the spiritualist, that's us, the spiritualist has the duty to try to counteract its influence and facilitate the victim. So we're to help others. If possible, spiritualists should first try to weed out these enemies in their own consciousness and then act as spiritual warriors to assist others. I wish I was keeping count, and maybe you're paying attention to how many times he sends us in ourselves. We have to examine ourselves. It's not about pointing fingers. And if we want to help others, or we want these qualities, if you will, to move out the way, we have to see within ourselves. So first, we should try to weed out these enemies, the ones we had named before, and this one, in our own consciousness, and then act as spiritual warriors to assist others. We want to look at this issue from many different angles so that people can first help themselves, then help others. I think there's a statement, physician, heal thyself. We can't help anybody else if we are in pain ourselves or in being agitated by this. So he's giving us some anger management techniques. One is keep a journal. Oh, you say, oh, I do that. Great. Oh, I've thought of doing that. Now's a good time to start. And I'm speaking to myself. Mine is right here on my desk, and I started, and I don't pull it out every day, but I try to keep one going. I've been doing that for years. He says journaling is one technique that can help us manage our anger. Writing often helps us look deeper into the issues in our lives. Because a diary is like a private friend. You can put anything down there just to get it out. And sometimes when you get it out and you put it down and look at it, you have a realization of what's going on with you. He says it can also help us increase our level of accountability, because when we do not plan or strategize, Maya or illusion will plan for us. We can either make plans to accelerate in our devotion, or we can allow the duality of Marcha Loka, or the planet of death, to completely bombard us with relative or transitory concerns. If we succumb to the influence of our environment, the senses and the mind will literally drag us away. These are important points. He gives us another scriptural statement from Bhagavad Gita, the 15th chapter, text number 7, which says, the living entities in this conditioned world, the living entities, that's us, in this conditioned world, that's where we are my eternal fragmental parts. This is Krishna, God speaking. Are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to the conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. The author goes on. The mind causes intense suffering as it responds to the senses in unhealthy ways. In our journal, we can monitor our level of anger by using a scale of 1 to 10. On a particular day, we can use a number on this scale to rate our level of aggression and our level of arousal. In this way, we can monitor our emotions daily and also try to pinpoint which situations excite our anger or cause us to lose control. So we are responsible. We are accountable. Just remember that. It's not about pointing fingers. We keep saying that. And he's giving us a technique to be able to do that. He says, by constantly observing ourselves, we can find ways to incite love rather than lust, because lust always stems from excessive attachments or overreactions. And this constantly observing ourselves, that's observing our inner selves, not that, oh, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? I am. You know that, remember that. No, it's not about an artistic observing of ourselves. It's about a spiritual observing of ourselves, knowing that we are the eternal fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord. And as he told us in the School of Love, the soul is made for love. So this is why he tells us we can find ways to incite love rather than lust, because we are made for love. And lust is just a perversion of that love. The next anger management he mentions is evaluate the experience. Now, he says in order to manage anger, we can always try to name it, face it, feel it, and release it. Sounds like a wonderful exercise. Again, if you are observing yourself, if you're following these other technologies, you can name it. You know what started it, where it started. And then you face it. You don't say, oh no, not me, it's their fault. No, okay, let's look at it. Look at it clearly. And once you face it, you can feel it. Right now I'm feeling this way because of this. I am feeling it. But once you name it, face it, feel it, then you can release it, because you know it's a transitory thing, or it's that you were in a certain state of consciousness and were not dealing with your spiritual self at the time. He says we must first identify the enemy before it discreetly sneaks into our environment. If it successfully enters our arena, it will cause all types of destruction, like a cancer or a time bomb. Many people live in a state of constant crisis, and as a result, they cannot experience deeper levels of love and realization. Due to anger, which may stem from negative experiences in the past. And how many people spend time talking about what happened last week, last year, last month? Due to anger, which may stem from negative experiences in the past, they generalize their experiences and then carry this mentality into their relationship with others. And that other has nothing to do with what happened in your past. Consequently, it interferes with their ability to be fully present in their interactions with other people and in their ability to say yes to God at every moment. I like that. Yes to God at every moment. Because God is within our heart. We've said that. We know we're part of Him. So He has to be with us. And what He's bringing to us is for us to learn how to be closer to Him, or how to remember who we are as His part and parcels. He says, the author says, we can look at our day and evaluate our experiences in order to discover which situation trigger our anger so that we can deal with it accordingly. And maybe that's a wonderful exercise for the next week to practice. If you find yourself getting triggered into anger, take time and look at it, especially if it's happening on a fairly regular basis. If it's occasional, even then, take the time and look at your day and evaluate your experiences of that day in order to discover which situations trigger our anger. Then you can deal with it accordingly. And when you find the situation, you get your journal and you sit down and you write out sometimes it's step by step, word by word, and you'll catch yourself when that was said, that's when I felt it. Then you examine what is it about what was said. And sometimes we'll find it was something that happened 5 years back. And somebody you cared for, or a parent or somebody said something and you got angry and you didn't let them know and you buried it, and here it is, somebody said the same thing and it suddenly comes up. But you wouldn't realize that unless you stop to evaluate. This is very important. The next anger management he has is stress relievers. We all know that certain basic activities relieve stress, such as exercise, meditation, visualization, and affirmations. Exercise releases positive stimulating hormones, which change the brain chemistry and strengthen the immune system. Meditation, visualization, and affirmation can all distinctly bring about a relaxation response that can help one to focus more intensely on healthy reflections and actions. That's why there's a lot of talk of meditation. Of course, a lot of yoga now. People are going to yoga studios, yoga classes, and a part of that yoga is usually a relaxation time, breathing and paying attention, and folks feel more relaxed and relieved. And even if they came in with some anger stuff, they forget it during that period of time. These stress reduction techniques can help us check our anger, especially when we go deeper into our spiritual activities, spiritual life. You see, spiritual warriors, he keeps reminding what must be primary in our lives. However, when our problems are very chronic, he says, we will need additional technologies that can create penetrating and lasting results. The next section is called Abandon Hypocrisy Through Genuine Spiritual Practices. There's that wonderful word, spiritual practices. This is what he says. As we become more introspective through chanting or meditation, the conscious mind will gradually calm down. However, if we do not allow ourselves to really embrace the mantra or transcendental sound vibration while we chant or pray, we will not derive the full benefit. How many are chanting or have a mantra or meditation that you sit and give some time to? But when you do that, are you giving your full attention to the sound of the mantra, the vibration of it? or to the words of the prayer that you're praying, or you're letting the mind flitter here and there. It's important that we want to calm that mind down to focus on something higher, and that's what chanting does. It's, if you're chanting the names of the Lord or praying to the Lord, you want to give full attention. He says, for instance, if a person gives to a charity but gives in an angry mood, the act will not have the same positive effect. Although the holy name of God and the ninefold process are very powerful, we constantly commit offenses. We will not receive the full value or potency. He says that this issue affects Vaishnav communities all over the world and even other religious traditions. Although people have bona fide scriptures and teachers, hypocrisy often overrules genuine performance. Hypocrisy on the part of both leaders and followers is often more dominant than genuine, authentic devotion and realization. Let me read that again. Hypocrisy on the part of both leaders and followers is often more dominant than genuine, authentic devotion and realizations. All over we see an increase in churches, mosques, and temples. But the national and international problems in the world order continue to increase. The problems have escalated to such an extent that some of the greatest assaults against humanity stem from religion itself. Fanaticism is one of those serious assaults that manifest from so-called religion. The current situation on the planet is not quite right. We need more open communication and the ability to authentically look at ourselves and others. We need to raise our own standards so that we can genuinely care for other people and give them more of ourselves. By raising our own standards, we will be able to present ourselves much more effectively due to our own purity. So we must look at where we are. What are our spiritual practices? What are we studying? What are we saying? How are we acting? Is it genuine? It's wonderful points here to consider. Because as he says, present ourselves more effectively, as we become more pure, we can give more love and help others. And if we're the example of a loving person helping, they will want to follow and become genuine also. The next is understanding the essence. He says we want to look closer at the scriptures in order to gain more insight. It is often important to turn to the scriptures and allow them to come alive. Sometimes spiritualists have so much knowledge, but still do not have the ability to change unhealthy patterns in their lives. For this reason, we find that some spiritualists also go to therapists, suffer from depression, and even commit suicide. If a good therapist can understand the client's philosophy and genuine needs, he or she can help the client remove many blocks. In this way, the spiritualist can more holistically embrace their own philosophy and increase their authenticity and productivity in many areas. We have to look close at the scriptures in order to gain more insight. And this is where we have Sadhu, Sastra, and what's the other one? Sadhu, Sastra, and Guru. How Guru, forgive me, I forget you. But this way you have like a team that you're not trying to do it by yourself. You're not trying to figure it out by yourself. You have the scriptures. If you don't understand, you can go to a sadhu or your guru to explain it to you and hear you and find out what you need. He says further, sometimes we need to look closer at what transpires in our mind and consciousness so that we can let Krishna or God in much more. Again, you see, we have to pay attention. We have to look closer at our own minds and our own consciousness. And as we do that, we can remove the things that are blockage and we can let Krishna or God in much more. He says we want to take advantage of the opportunity to address these issues, because in spite of all the philosophies and spiritual paths in this age of Kali, most people do not understand the essence of their philosophy or even their spiritual path. What does that mean? Do the processes given to us by the great acharyas or prophets lack potency? No. People lack the potency to really understand their essence. Due to the excessive misery on the planet, spiritualists need to be genuine and fully authentic in order to assist in raising the level of consciousness. Spiritualists, spiritual warriors, you're hearing the call. You're being given wonderful instructions. They need to be proactive instead of reactive, and whole within themselves in order to more effectively help others. What was I was just thinking of? An inside job. I don't know, that word came up inside that phrase. We have to work on ourselves. And if we're in a spiritual environment, we can ask for help with others, from others, and help each other. This is so important. He quotes here again from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 15. The Lord says, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. If you have a Bhagavad Gita, read that text and purport. The author goes on, Krishna is hiding in the heart, waiting for the opportunity to come forth and give full cognizance, full love, and full association. That's how close God is. Waiting for an opportunity in our hearts to come forth and give full cognizance, full love, and full association. That's the essence of our teaching. That's the essence of any religion you're in. That's the essence, and this is what he's talking about, understanding that essence. But he goes on, however, if anger and lust permeate our hearts, they will cover Krishna's wonderful presence as the Paramatma, the Lord in the heart, and prevent the realization and guidance from entering into our consciousness. So that's why this is so important, what we're studying, reading now, managing that anger, taking the steps, positive steps to remove it, so that the Lord in the heart can fully express through us. And that's all we want, because truly we are his parts and parcels. And if you're part of somebody and a parcel of somebody, you definitely want to express them and feel them and know them. And we have that opportunity. He says the contents of the heart will obviously affect the mind and gradually manifest in our words and actions. What's in our hearts? The contents of the heart will obviously affect the mind and gradually manifest in our words and actions. What are your words? What words have you spoken today? What is your action? What actions have you done today or taken today? Is it showing that the contents of your heart, what the contents of your heart and your mind are? It's just wonderful to think of. He says, of course, in the process of sadhana bhakti or devotional service, in practice, we involve all of our senses in God's service. If these enemies capture our senses, we will not be able to properly engage them in Krishna's service. If we cannot even employ our senses properly, we will not move from the basic level of fundamental devotional service. We will not develop real ruchi, which is spiritual taste, or prema, which is love of God, which is really the ultimate goal and purpose of us being here in this human body on this material world. Why? Because we will preoccupy our existence with the mundane. Anger is a great enemy because it harasses and incarcerates the bhakti lata bij, or the devotional creeper. We want to break these shackles that interfere with the creeper. Oh, I'm touched by this. Any comments or questions so far?
There's just been discussion back and forth between.
There's discussion back and forth between the people in the chat room. Are they discussing anger? Oh, okay. Okay. Get my ego out the way. You mean you're not listening to me? But they are listening.
Yeah.
And they're exchanging.
Yeah.
They don't want to exchange with me. Any comment? Anything? It's catching attention, I take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is Bhuvan Mohan there? Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming. Okay. The next is called Tiny Puddles of Anger. And again, this is essence. He's referring us to scripture. And he's giving us a purport of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 4th chapter, text 11.
There is a question.
There is a question?
Yeah, Bhakti Carol asks, it is good to keep a journal. What should we address or record in this journal?
We should address what we're feeling. You write what's going on at the moment in your life or in the day. Just the points I just got through reading to you about. Observe yourself, observe your activities, observe your words, your actions. He says you can increase your level of accountability, because in the journal, remember the part about you can monitor your level of anger if you're dealing with that by using a scale of 1 to 10. And on a particular day, use a number on this scale to rate our level of aggression or a level of arousal or a level of peacefulness and meditativeness. So you keep, it's a friend. You're keeping in touch with what's going on, especially if you are designed to be a strong spiritual warrior and a strong spiritualist. So you constantly observe yourself, and then you find ways and find out that you're really a wonderful spiritual being. I hope that helps, but it's really writing and staying in touch with what's happening, what you're working on, what you want to work on, where you want to go with what you're working on. And it's a good place to talk with God. You tell him what you're feeling. Remember, we just said he's right there in your heart. And he's ready to give you all the love and everything if you can remove the blockages. So you can write to him and discuss what you would like to do or how you would like to hear from him or how you want to get closer to him. And he may respond to you. He will respond as you open your heart. So yes, a journal is a wonderful place to keep in touch with where you are. And that's what we've been saying, and the author has been just keep reminding us, because it is about our self-growth and understanding. So you can break the shackles that interfere with you moving ahead spiritually. Okay? That was Carol? Okay. Okay, Carol? And if you don't have one, tomorrow, I used to tell folks, get a nice, attractive journal. They make them. They're beautiful these days. And get a special pen so that when you get ready to write, you get excited of picking up that beautiful book, however it is, with a beautiful picture on the cover, or the colors that are woven in it. Mine looks like fabric. And you enjoy picking up that pen. And you don't have to write forever. You just sit down and put a few lines down. Right now I'm feeling this way. Or right now anger is coming. It's about a 5.6, 5.8 or something, or almost a 6. And what triggered it was just based on the things that we've talked about. And you look at your shoulds and blamers and see what triggers it. So much technology and tools he's giving. So if you remember what's here, if you have the book, that'll help. If not, if you're making notes, and just get to work on a journal. Okay? And you'll see change, because you'll see where you are and where you want to go, and you'll be able to take the steps, because he's definitely, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, giving you tools and technologies. Okay, we're looking at tiny puddles of anger. That's what this section. Any more? Another one?
Yeah. Libby asks, in Christianity there is the concept of righteous anger. Is there really any such thing? Should we be angry with evil doing?
Righteous anger. What does that mean, Libby? Righteous anger. I think he goes into. Okay, listen, Libby. I don't know if I'll finish, because he talks later in the book about spiritual application of anger. that any quotes from scripture of some acharyas and saintly people who do get angry, and it has to do with what's going on as far as serving God, or how people are offensive to God. So I hold on to that, Libby. Stay with me. I don't know if I'll get to it tonight, but a righteous anger, as long as you're angry because someone is offending another person, or someone is offending God or his servants, but it's how you deal with that also. Okay? So Bhakti Tirtha Swami will definitely cover that. Alright? Okay, I don't know why I expected to hear her voice say, alright.
Yeah, Carol and Libby said thank you.
Alright, so tiny puddles of anger. This is from the scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, one of our books from ancient scriptures. And this is what it says. Those who do not accept the devotional service of the Supreme Lord can be considered in two categories. Those engaged in sense gratification are easily conquered by the demigods through various weapons such as hunger, thirst, sexual desire, lamentation for the past, and vain hoping for the future. Such materialistic fools, infatuated with the material world, are easily controlled by the demigods, who are the ultimate supplying agents of sense gratification. But according to Sridhar Swami, persons who attempt to subdue the desires of the material senses and thus avoid the control of the demigods without surrendering to the Supreme Lord are even more foolish than the sense gratifiers. Although crossing the ocean of sense gratification, those who perform severe penances without service to the Lord eventually drown in tiny puddles of anger. Like that. One who simply performs material penances does not actually purify his heart. By one's material determination, one may restrict the activities of the senses, although one's heart is still filled with this material desire. The practical result is krodha or anger. We have been artificial performers of penance who have become very bitter and angry through denial of the senses. The author says, in spite of extreme austerities and penances, if one lacks bhakti or service, devotion, one will access anger in a more intense mood, because one will have more mystic powers to use as weapons. Sometimes people engage in scriptural arguments, but since they do not have a devotional consciousness, they simply beat each other over the head with the scriptures. Now this next section is called healthy anger. Listen, Libby, you may find your answer here more, because something came to mind. Anger as a catalyst. Beyond the healthy aspects of anger, we will find some healthy and even transcendental aspects of anger. In one sense, anger is easily recognizable because it is a part of life. It is a reaction or an overreaction to a situation. However, we must always ask, how do we use anger for growth and acceleration back into our original consciousness? And what is our original consciousness? That we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And we are His servants, and our purpose of being here is to serve Him. And we are eternal souls. So how do we use anger? Do we use it for growth and acceleration back into that understanding? Anger, he says, can function as a distinct catalyst that helps us look closer at ourselves and at the situation. I keep coming back, running through my head, Libby, that righteous anger, and just hearing this. If it's being used for growth and acceleration in reconnecting with God and helping others reconnect with God and develop their love for God, then it's righteous. But if we're using it, as he said here, to beat people over the head and to condemn and call names, we have to be careful. We have to be careful. He goes on, anger can function as a distinct catalyst. Somebody else?
Spiritual Warrior 4, right?
Spiritual Warrior 4, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind.
What chapter is that?
We're on chapter 3, Managing Anger. Okay? Chapter 3, Managing Anger, and we're up to healthy. We're looking at healthy anger. And the section is anger as a catalyst. Anger can function as a distinct catalyst that helps us look closer at ourselves and at situations. There it is again. We've got to look at ourselves, inside ourselves. What are we thinking, feeling, acting, saying, doing? If we find ourselves in a situation that makes us angry, we can look at the cause of the anger, which may not even relate to the specific person. This intense introspection, repeat, intense introspection. This spiritual path is not easy, but it's work, but it's wonderful work because we're doing intense introspection. Can help us find a more positive solution. Sometimes anger gives us a chance to look at our own selfishness. It helps us to see our own desires so that we can determine where they stem from and where they want to go. And this is another reason, wonderful reason for journal writing. Because sometimes when these things come up, it's painful. Oh my God, that's inside of me. That's what I'm doing. But if you're putting it down in your journal, only you and what's in the journal and the journal paper will see it. But it's coming out. And as it comes out, and if you're desiring to be genuine, as we just spoke about, it will help remove them. Because you have to, what did he say? See it, face it, release it. Once again, he says, anger can act as a barometer so that we can step back and look at the situation from a proper perspective. Martin Luther King, he said, used anger productively instead of destructively, because his anger against the discrimination towards African Americans pushed him to act in a positive way. In this case, his anger began a powerful movement towards change. In some cases, anger can activate a person to act positively. Mahatma Gandhi also used his anger to create a powerful non-violent movement to demand India's independence from Britain. He says, on the material level, if someone physically attacks you, anger can even engender strength, fortitude, and determination. If someone crosses healthy boundaries in a relationship, anger can help you remain conscientious about the situation. For instance, if someone touches a person in the wrong place, a strong response will clearly indicate that the person will not tolerate such behavior. It does not have to be a violent retaliation, but the person can clearly establish his or her own boundaries. Of course, it provides a chance to look at the deeper issues within ourselves. There it is again, beloved. He keeps sending us inside because that's where the work has to be done. We also recognize anger as a natural stage in the grieving process, which we will discuss more in depth in the next chapter. Before one can entirely resolve the grief, one normally experiences a period of anger as a way to bring it out and deal with the issue. Now it's almost 8 o'clock. I want to ask Libby, was that answer satisfactory for you? Or are you just waiting to hear more? It's time for Phil. Is she still there? Was it okay? Here's a section. I'm going to read this before I close. Listen, Libby, and everybody else. Spiritual application of anger. He says, anger definitely has some healthy purposes in the spiritual sense. For instance, although blasphemy disturbs us, we should not feel anger, but also compassion and concern for the blasphemer. People who make such offenses actually commit more of an injustice to themselves. A spiritualist should feel compassion for such an offender because the person might seriously damage his or her own spiritual growth and devotional creeper. We could consider the spiritualist's intense feelings to a type of anger. Actually, he feels deep compassion for the offender because such actions or words will only lead to degradation of that person. And I'm going to stop there. Next week, I got to mark my book so I'll remember where we left off. Any other questions or comments? 7, 9, and we'll continue with spiritual application of anger next week. There are a few stories he gives to show how it works.
Okay, yeah, there are a few questions.
Okay.
The first question is, How does humility play a role in controlling anger?
Good question. Who's asking that?
Manjesh.
From Canada? Is that? Okay. Welcome. Glad you're there. How does humility, what is it?
Play a role in controlling anger.
In controlling anger. Okay, I would like you to tell me what you think of when you think of humility, which was one of our 12 qualities. Because if one is humble and knows who is the controller of things, the arranger, and has that connection with the Lord, and know that they themselves are not the doer, they would then have this compassion. This is just what I read, that a spiritualist should feel compassion for an offender because the person might seriously damage his or her own spiritual growth. So with humility, you're not looking for any praise yourself or glorification yourself. You're really caring for the next person. And if that person is a blasphemer and you hear them blaspheming another person or even the Lord, that anger that you may feel will trigger, as he says here, compassion for that person. So being humble would save you from thinking, I got to do something about this myself, and how dare you speak about that, and maybe punch the guy in the mouth. It would help you to feel compassion and see that they may be in pain or in an ignorant mood at that moment, and that what they're doing will not help their growth. But with compassion and understanding, or as he said, he feels deep compassion for the offender, and then may be able to speak some words, and if not, just not retaliate or react. That's my answer to that. How is that?
So that's a very good response by Mother and John.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Okay, the next question is by Bhakti Carol. She said, recently she's been injured by someone twice, and I was again at home in pain, unable to carry on in a normal way. So again, I was not angry at the person, really wasn't, but at times felt irritation at the situation rising up. Just situation that I was injured again.
If I recall, Carol, this question is not a new question. I was going through my papers and I felt so bad. I came across your email, and I believe the question stated in this way. Have you been hearing how Bhakti Tirtha Swami keeps telling us we have to do introspection? We have to go within. And this is where maybe journal writing for the moment might help, to really write, what is it that's hurting you? What is this person doing? And as he said here about having boundaries and, knowing when to declare that enough is enough, and that I'm hurt. You were hurt some time ago, Carol, if I recall. So you need to look at this. What are your boundaries with this person that they're hurting you? What are you expecting from this person that you're not getting? Or what are you giving and not getting in return? It sounds like I cannot answer what you're to do except to follow through on what the author and my teacher is saying here, we have to do introspection. We have to look within. And he's telling us how to do that. And one, I think that journal writing is wonderful. And if you're around other spiritual people, to sit and, if you trust them, have confidence to talk about this. But you really need to look at and see where your boundaries are, and to get your spiritual strength of knowing who you are as a spiritual being, who the Lord doesn't want you hurt. He says he's in everyone's heart. And if he's with us, he doesn't want us hurt. But he also gives us the intelligence to know when to draw boundaries and to step away from hurtful situations so that we can be more peaceful in our hearts. But it has to be a spiritual perspective, because if you step away from that situation, you need to know you're not alone. You need to know that you're protected by the Lord. Or you're just to speak up in that situation and feel protected and safe with God's care, that you can say to the person, you're hurting me and I feel hurt because you said you did. I'm not going to take it anymore. Maybe you need to go get help because I am myself not going to take it anymore and I want to get closer to God, and maybe you need. Do you see what I'm saying? Accountability and responsibility, and you need to really stop and see what is going on, why you feel hurt, what is it you want, and how you want it. And maybe, hopefully, you have a spiritual buddy that can help you walk through this. Okay, Carol, I'm sorry I didn't respond to you by email. I just came across your email address, and if I recall the same question, I don't remember what it was. So I hope this is helpful, dear. But as he keeps telling us, and if we kept reading, we have to work on ourselves. Nothing outside of us can change until we inside change. And the change has to come with knowing who we are as eternal beings. And as we just read, God himself saying, you are my eternal fragmental part. That means you're very close to him. You're part of him. You don't have his qualities in full, but you have a small amount. And that means strength and love and compassion. And have that for yourself, Carol. All right, Carol? Okay? Any other? Okay. Spiritual warriors, the battlefield is consciousness. We've gotten a lot of wonderful, wonderful tools, technologies. Work on yourselves this week and see what happens, and maybe you can share something next week. Thank you for coming. Hare Krishna. Have a good week.